Blog Talk Radio.
You're listening live to another edition of ATL Prime Sports. Todd Corder here in Atlanta with JJ on the other side of the ATL. Mark Mancini in Los Angeles, and our producer Wayne is in Memphis, Tennessee. Glad to be back. We got a special guest today, Dave Cohen, the voice of the Georgia State Panthers for football, basketball, and baseball. He is going to give his opinion on NIL, which has been the biggest story in college sports during this off season of college sports, if there is such thing as an off season in college sports. And before we do that, let you know you can get a hold of JJ at JJ Get You One. You can get a hold of Mark at Mancini Sports. You can get a hold of myself at Corder Todd. You can get a hold of Wayne at RW Jr. And you can get a hold of us, all of us, at ATL Prime Sports. And you can get a hold of our guest, Dave Cohen, at GA State Voice, I believe. I don't have it in front of me. If I messed it up, Dave, you can correct me. Dave, welcome to the show today.
Great to be with you guys. It's been a few weeks, and we're entering interesting times in college athletics, which I know was the topic of discussion this afternoon.
Indeed, it is. Very interesting. And I'm just going to come out with it, Dave. I'm actually going to ask two questions. What will college sports look like after 5 years of NIL? And number two, how does this impact the athletes at Georgia State, not only the men, but the women?
Well, the answer to your first question is a big question mark. Nobody knows because, I feel like college athletics is, for lack of a better term, moving at the speed of sound right now as it evolves at really all levels, not just the Power Five, which we read and hear and see about on a daily basis, but even the levels below the Power Five, the Group of Five, which Georgia State is a part of, obviously in the Sun Belt Conference, and the schools you've got in the Sun Belt and Conference USA and the Mountain West and the MAC and so on and so forth. And then even at the lower levels, below the Division I level, in football, FCS, and obviously Division II, Division III, NAIA. There's a lot going on. And, ultimately, guys, it all comes back to the almighty dollar. It seems like more and more as this moves along, and it looks this way right now, more at the upper echelon of college athletics, that college athletics is moving more to emulating what we see on a professional sports stage. And it's all driven, obviously, by money. I mean, that's the society that we live in. And we know what the pro players make in the NBA and the National Hockey League and Major League Baseball and obviously the NFL. College football and really men's college basketball are the two on the collegiate level that most emulate what we see on the professional level with regards to the dollars that it generates and the dollars that it drives. And it was really only a matter of time. It's been talked about now for a number of years. It's been bubbling for years below the surface, and just in the last couple of 3 years has begun to bubble on the surface and above the surface, that the product in college athletics, again, focusing on football and men's basketball at the highest levels, and maybe even women's basketball in certain situations, the dollars that it's driving from those sports and your product, for the most part, other than room, board, and scholarship, receives no monetary part of the dollars that are earned. Eventually, something was going to happen. It could only go on for so long. And because, every day we go on Twitter and we go on Facebook, and if you're old enough like me, you still open a newspaper, and we see that the NCAA has just signed a new TV deal with whatever outlet it is, and it's for billions of dollars. And once again, the product doesn't share in the prize money, we'll call it. It was really only a matter of time. As I said, it's been bubbling now for a number of years. But again, I think we're kind of moving, I say at the speed of sound. For college athletics, it's moving very quickly with the changes that are taking place, both on and off the field. To say 5 years, you could rephrase that question and say, what will it look like in one calendar year by the time we get to the 2023 season or the 2022 season after this upcoming run through college football and through college basketball? Your second question with regards to Georgia State, I have not heard of any athletes at Georgia State, at least not publicly, that have come out and said that they have made a benefit from the name, image, likeness. That's not to say that it hasn't happened or that something's not in the works, but I have not heard of anything with regards to any student athlete at Georgia State. I've heard probably the same ones you have. The workout gym that is now going to be a quote-unquote sponsor of every football player on the University of Miami Hurricane football team, and various other student athletes. Most of the ones that I've heard of, and there's been 2 or 3 of them, have been at the Power 5 level. I've probably heard the same ones you have, but I think again, moving along quickly here, we're going to hear about more and more and more student athletes that are taking part, in the name, image, likeness possibilities that are now in front of them.
You're listening to Dave Cohen right here on ATL Prime Sports, voice of the Georgia State Panthers football, baseball, basketball. Dave, good to hear from you. I'm going to talk to you about a football question. We're getting close to that big opener against Army. You got 5 returning starters on the offensive line by my count, and that's a huge, huge advantage. Should help the run game. What will the rest of the starting lineup look like again for that big opener against Army?
Well, again, this is, an odd year. As last season was an odd year because of the virus, as we have begun to emerge from that for the most part. The numbers that I have were 22 of 24 players that started a game last year made the decision to return, or starters that are back. The number I had was 9, and that was earlier in the summer. 9 had made the decision to take advantage of what is known as their COVID bonus year. In all honesty, it's to me this is a little bit of a double-edged sword as we enter into the season. And the reason I say that is because this will be season number 12 for Georgia State football. They're coming off a 6-4 run in a 10-game schedule last year that saw them beat Western Kentucky in the Lending Tree Bowl. They're taking as much momentum into a season as they have in the prior 11 years. And this is the most experienced team that we will have seen, again, with the numbers that are returning. So from that standpoint, I feel really good about it, and it's exciting. And, I think that Georgia State's fan base is feeling the same way. Again, though, the other side of that is, and I have people say, well, how do you think they're going to start out this year? And I'm like, well, that's the $64,000 question, because, yes, we did beat Army 2 years ago in Atlanta in a driving rainstorm. But with Army, you kind of know what you're going to get year in and year out, and you got to make sure that, every T is crossed and I is dotted in your preparation for stopping and competing with that level of a football team. And pretty much year in and year out, Army is extremely competitive. So, we're going to get another look at them in the opening game, September, in first weekend in September at Center Park Credit Union Stadium. Well, then week 2, you got to go on the road to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. You're going to take on what should be a top 25 North Carolina Tar Heel football team. Then you're going to come home and you're going to play Charlotte, the 49ers of UNC Charlotte, or Charlotte as they're now known. And then week 4, you're going to go back on the road in the Power 5, and you're going to go to Jordan-Hare Stadium. You're going to take on the Auburn Tigers. Now, that's a first-year head coach, actually a former Sun Belt coach there, Brian Harsin, who spent time at Arkansas State. So with Auburn, honestly, you don't know what you're going to get in the first year. Maybe this is a good year for Georgia State to be going in there. Could Auburn be this year's Tennessee for Georgia State? Way too early to tell. And then after you've played your 4 non-conference games, you got to come home and you're going to open up Sun Belt Conference play against Appalachian State. Georgia State came awfully close, really had their best opportunity to beat them in Boone last year. I think we lost 17-13 was the final score. But Georgia State has yet to beat the Mountaineers since both have been in the Sun Belt Conference playing football. So the first 5 ball games, to recap, is Army at North Carolina, Charlotte at home, at Auburn, and then Appalachian State at home. That's what I call a gauntlet for us, because even though I feel good about us personnel-wise, we could go 2-3. We could go 1-4. Hopefully that won't happen. We could go 4-1. But it's too early to tell right now, but it can be a little nerve-wracking when you just look at it on paper.
You know, Dave, Mark Mancini out here in Los Angeles, so blessed to have you part of the ATL Prime Sports this morning out here. I want to talk about the college football. You know, growing up, we saw the Rose Bowls, the Orange Bowls, and some of these things, and now we've got, 4 games to decide a number 1. Now they're trying to expand it. I'm all for the expansion of this thing because I think it gives a lot of these teams that are on the bubble a chance to get in there and get this thing into a playoff format, kind of like the NFL. What's your take on that across the board?
Well, Mark, I know Todd and JJ have heard my spiel about this numerous times on various podcasts that I've been a part of with those guys. I'm for expanding it as well. I've always said that the Power 5 has this. They've built a really nice treehouse, yet they've pulled the ladder up, and they really don't want very many other people to come up into the treehouse that they've built. That's why they've kept it to pretty much in recent years. It's been Clemson, and it's been Notre Dame, and it's been Alabama, and it's been Oklahoma. It's been Ohio State. It's basically the same cast of characters year in and year out. And look, I understand it's not the NCAA basketball tournament because the games are obviously completely different. But that's what makes the NCAA basketball tournament such a great event, is that everybody knows at the outset that even no matter what their situation is, they've got a shot. Even if it's 1 in a million, they've got a shot. The problem for me in college football is, I know at the beginning of the season, for example, Georgia State has no shot. They're not getting into the playoff. As I've said before, and maybe it could be altered a little bit, but I think it should be 12, and I think that the 10 conference champions should get those 10 bids, and then you have 2 wild card bids. But the problem with that, which I understand, is that, okay, let's say Alabama wins it, or in their case, God forbid they lose, and they get, relegated to one of the 2 wild cards, while the champion of the Sun Belt is getting a bid. Well, everybody's going to be kicking ex-SEC school or Oklahoma or Notre Dame may get left out because now the spots are being taken by the Conference USA champion and the Sun Belt champion and the Mountain West champion and the American Athletic Conference champion. All teams that have done what they've been asked to do, which is play their schedule, win their conference championship, and hopefully have a shot. But you and I both know, because even though we're not sitting in that room, we have a pretty good idea of what's being discussed in that room. Again, it goes back to dollars. The amount of money that is on the table and is at stake, and with television involved at the level that it is, the game is really made and it's played for by the upper echelon of the Power 5. What I say is idealistic, not realistic. Will I live long enough to see a Sun Belt Conference team play for a national championship or be a part of the playoff? I don't know, maybe, but I doubt it, because that's not the level that they're looking for, and it's not the level that drives the dollars, and it's not what they want in the treehouse. Now, if they expand it, that's great. I don't know, maybe there's one spot of the 8 that will be held for the best team out of all of the group of 5 conferences. So you've got to be the best team out of the American Athletic, the Mountain West, Conference USA, Sun Belt. That's just one team out of every team in all of those conferences combined. Is that going to be UCF one year? Is it going to be Cincinnati one year? Is it going to be Boise State one year? Who knows? But this whole expansion talk is really for the benefit of the same people that benefit from when it was just 4. It's just going to expand the table for the rich to get richer and the group of 5 to be looking outside from the outside looking in.
Dave, I'm going to go back to the NIL with my next question, but this one I have here, I want to expand on that. I've heard a lot of talk that we will not have an expanded playoff in 2 years because ESPN holds the contract, and it's a lengthy one for the playoff. Why in the world would they want to give that up and let a wide world of negotiations between all the other networks get in on this playoff, because they're all going to want in on it, and they hold the rights to it? So I'm hearing we will not have this playoff in 2 years. Your thoughts, and then I'll go back to the NIL with you.
Well, and I'm not sure 100%, but if they expand the playoff, does that necessarily mean from a TV standpoint that it's now on the open market for other networks to bid on it? Or if it's done from the inside, which I assume that it would be, with TV's involvement, that at least from the outset, under the current contract, the ESPN and college football would just expand the playoff and expand the coverage of the playoffs on, let's say, ESPN. Listen, we all know the more games that are played, the more revenue that is created. And so, again, at the end of the day, I think everybody benefits. I don't know that anybody really loses in that equation. So maybe it will be 2 years if it takes them that long to make that decision. I've got to believe that the powers that be, if they have not made a decision already, then the process would be pretty close, and that they're trying to figure out how to finalize it and get it ready to be implemented. But it's a win-win for everybody, because who's going to lose in that equation? Except maybe the players who now have to play more games. But with NIL, if they're that kind of a player that can take advantage of that, well, that could be a benefit for those student athletes as well. Playing on that big of a stage could be a boon financially to certain players on certain teams.
Well, Dave, and we'll go to the NIL. I'll make this comment, then we'll go right to it. I want to know what you think of it. Speaking of losing out, a lot of these bowls are going to lose out. They probably are not going to survive. Very few of them will survive. Your thoughts on that real quick, and then we've got to go to the NIL.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that totally, because, as I've said, most of the bowls, at least at the levels that Georgia State competes in, and the bowls that the group of 5 compete in, it could be the Lending Tree Bowl, it could be the RL Carriers Bowl, it could be the Auto Nation Cure Bowl. No matter what the title name of it is, look, at the end of the day, they're all the Chambers of Commerce Bowl for whatever city. Insert city name. Orlando, Florida. Mobile, Alabama. New Orleans, Louisiana. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which just added a bowl that the Sun Belt is a part of. Anybody that's going to that bowl knows they're not going to the playoff, and that they're not going to play for a national championship, and they're not going to be competing at the upper echelon level of the Power 5. We know that. But it's still something for the student athletes to play for. Whether it's going to Myrtle Beach to play in that bowl, or whether it's going to Mobile to play in the Lending Tree Bowl, whatever the bowl is, it's still a reward for the student athlete at the end of the season, and it does give them something to play for. And on the other side, as I said, the Chambers of Commerce Bowl, insert name of city that's hosting, listen, the way they look at it is how many hotel rooms are going to be sold, how many restaurants are going to have extra patrons in it because fans and family and friends and players are visiting their city for a day or two. What is the worth of the media exposure for Mobile, Alabama when the Lending Tree Bowl is played? or if the Myrtle Beach Bowl is on ESPN or ESPN2 or whatever. At that level bowl, I don't necessarily see them all throwing in the chips and doing away with the bowl because, again, Todd, it comes down to, is the bowl game a financial windfall for that particular city and community? And I think the answer to that, for the most part, is yes. Whether it's Montgomery, Alabama, on the Camellia Bowl. You know, I'm thinking of the 5 bowls that the Sun Belt Conference is affiliated with. Those bowls, under normal circumstances, not the COVID-19 virus year, but under normal circumstances, to host a couple of football teams for a couple of days and their fan base, I would have to think filling hotel rooms, putting more people in restaurants, having people spend money in your community and in your city has to make it worthwhile, and I see those bowls continuing to try and function as long as they function at a level where they're profitable.
Hey, Dave, back to the NIL, you were talking about trees and the tree houses and the ladder trying to get up and folks aren't invited. I'm going to correlate this to the NIL. I think it's going to help tremendously for the schools like that are in big cities. I think it's going to help a school like UCLA, USC, all kinds of businesses, all kinds of companies, maybe a school like the University of Pittsburgh, things like that. You're going to, Southern Methodist University. I think that'll help them tremendously being in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And I also think it can help a school like Georgia State and give them a leg up potentially on anybody in the Sun Belt because they're here in Atlanta and Georgia State plays in of all the teams in the Sun Belt. They have the biggest market by far, and this NIL can help them in this market. Your thoughts?
Well, one would think that would be the case. I've said for years, it's both a positive and a negative that Georgia State is located in what is now, the 7th largest media market in the country. It's positive because, you're in Atlanta. There's upwards of 6 million plus people in your marketplace. It's a pretty good, we'll say, pretty good media market. But on the other side of that sword, to me, one of the problems is if you're a Georgia State, and you're trying to run and compete with, we'll say, the bigger dogs or other schools in your conference. And we see this from a, we'll call it a marketing and an advertising standpoint, even right now. You're competing with 4 professional pro franchises, Braves, Hawks, Falcons, United. And at one point, the National Hockey League was here, Thrashers, which you remember. You're competing against an ACC school that's 4 or 5 miles from our campus in Georgia Tech. And of course, the University of Georgia, although it's an hour and a half away for all intents and purposes, might be the biggest thing sports-wise in Atlanta and the state of Georgia because it is the quote-unquote flagship university. My point is that a lot of times by the time a lot of businesses want to be associated with what we'll term the big time. And the big time is professional, and it's Power 5. That's not to say that's everyone, but perception is reality. And the Sun Belt is a group of 5 mid-major. And when you're trying to compete in a major market as a mid-major, you got to be going to the NCAA tournament almost every year. You got to be making a bowl game, hopefully winning a bowl game every year. Your sports really have to be successful in order to find your place, your niche, your spot in what is already a crowded sports marketplace. Whereas, if you're in Lafayette, Louisiana, and you have their facilities, you've been successful like they've been, you're really the only game in town. I mean, really on a nightly basis. Are they competing against the Saints and the New Orleans Pelicans and LSU? Maybe a little bit. But if you live in that general area and you don't want to drive to New Orleans or Baton Rouge, but you want to see good, top-quality college athletics, you're going to go watch Louisiana Lafayette, or Louisiana, as they're now known. They have a built-in audience, and they don't have the level of competition that Georgia State has. competing in this size market as opposed to Lafayette, Louisiana. So, again, there's two sides to it. I don't know that Georgia State necessarily has the advantage. It maybe has advantages in some areas, but in other areas, I would say the advantage could definitely go to a school like Louisiana or a Georgia Southern competing in a small market like Statesboro or South Alabama down in Mobile, so on and so forth.
You're listening to Dave Cohen right here on ATL Prime Sports. Dave, I'll ask you kind of a two-part question here. Reggie Bush, should he get his Heisman back now that name, image, likeness is legal? And two, basically, actually, I'll just stick with the Bush question. I just want to hear your opinion on that because I'm very curious. Just the Reggie Bush question.
All right, so does Pete Rose now belong in the Hall of Fame because gambling is now basically in partnership with professional sports? Do I think Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame? I sure do. Should it say on his plaque telling the story of why for years he wasn't? I sure do. I mean, that's part of his story. The Hall of Fame is for what went on within the white lines and on the field. Did he break a rule, a cardinal rule? He did. Will he get in anytime soon? I don't think so. Will he get in after he's left this earth? Possibly. I think Reggie Bush is kind of in an equal boat. I mean, he committed his violations when it was still a violation, as did Pete Rose when betting on baseball. That was a cardinal sin in the game of baseball. It's still a cardinal sin, but the outlooks on gambling today and professional sports and college sports have come a long way and are now accepted as opposed to what they were then. Should Reggie Bush get his Heisman Trophy back? I think so. And should the records have been expunged from the record books? They should not have. They could find a way at the time to what we'll call punish, if you want to use that word. But it shouldn't come at the expense of everything that was accomplished. Everybody sat in those stands and watched on television and listened on the radio. No, he accomplished everything that he accomplished. Taking it out of the media guide record book doesn't really do anything. So, yeah, I think he should. And I think, again, I think that's a very, very similar question to the ongoing Pete Rose question, and I think they're very similar. And I think the answers are very similar as well. You can tell the story. You can reward them while at the same time telling the story of what happened to them.
Dave, we have 2 minutes left in the show. I like your answer. I like your comparison between Reggie Bush and the NCAA. I tell you what, I think Bush will get his Heisman back. The NCAA will do anything right now to stay in power because the NIL is going to make the NCAA powerless. So if the NCAA wants to get back in good favor, I think the NCAA will give Bush his Heisman back because the Heisman Committee, they stepped off and they handed it down to the NCAA, which to me I thought was pretty I guess being cowards, sissies, trying to make the decision. We got about a minute and 30 left. Your thoughts on the NCAA going forward because they're going to lose their power.
Well, there's a lot of people that question various rulings, that the NCAA comes out with. And, again, we don't have time to go over all of those. But, again, I think Reggie Bush, look, he accomplished what he accomplished. He gained every one of those yards. He scored every one of those touchdowns. He rightfully was selected as the Heisman Trophy winner the year that he was selected. And to me, it's kind of silly to just all of a sudden expunge those records and say, all of a sudden, you're no longer the Heisman Trophy winner, and you never were.
Exactly.
I just think that sports fans are too smart. Listen, we know what happened, but we also know why he was selected. So do the right thing and recognize him for the accomplishments that he accomplished. Give him the Heisman Trophy. Put the records back in the book. And if you want to put an asterisk explaining why what happened, then do that. That's fine if that makes everybody feel better.
We got about 35 seconds left, Max. Very quickly, does the NCAA, do they still exist after this NIL gets going?
I think the NCAA will exist. There has to be some sort of a governing body for college athletics. Is everything that they do acceptable to everyone all the time right now? No, but again, we'll see what happens moving forward. Again, everything that's happening now is picking up steam across college athletics. And we're seeing a lot of things morphing and changing at a very, very, very fast rate.
Yeah, Dave, we can go ahead and expand on this another time. We'll go into it much deeper with you. Thanks for coming on. I want to thank everyone for listening to ATL Prime Sports today. We will see you all next week for myself in Atlanta, for JJ in Atlanta, for Dave in Atlanta. Thanks for coming on. For Wayne in Memphis and for Mark Mancini in Los Angeles. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Get you one.